My name is Art. For those of you who don't know, my name is Art, and I am an addict. I do not have a substance use disorder, and I never suffered from addiction. In fact, the people around me suffered from my addiction. So for me, I've always been an addict. I love the term. I got sober February 16th of 2011. I got sober due to the fact that my father decided it was important on that day to treat my addiction differently than he ever had. See, on that day, my father let it be known to me that it was no longer acceptable for me to do it. He didn't mince words. He wasn't that loving in the case. I did see him cry that day, but the cry quickly turned to anger, and he said, "Today it's over, son. If you use drugs one more time, you will not be part of this family, and I'll have to be done with you." And he did me a favor that day, and it wasn't pleasurable at that time, but I respect him greatly for what he did for me. That led really quickly to catapulted into recovery. It was no longer acceptable for me to behave that way, and he let it be known, and so did the rest of my family. And a lot of you out here experienced the results of suffering from my addiction, so for you, I apologize. My sister is here, and Misty is here, and I still owe her an apology for how I behaved. And as it went on, really quickly, I decided to start helping drug addicts for two reasons. Number one, I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have a skill. I hadn't worked in 7 years. I didn't have a career path. I was kind of hopelessly lost in what I would do, so it looked like a good idea. And secondly, I always had this idea in my head that I was some type of hero, so it gave me a good opportunity to try to be that. And so you start helping, and you don't know what you're doing, and you just try to be heroic, and you try to help people, and at some point you decide maybe you got to get good at it, and maybe you got to do what works. And so what happens is you start getting your own evidence of what works and what doesn't work, and you start collecting that stuff, and it's empirical. It's known what works and doesn't work. There's no study to be done. It's right there for you. You can see, is this person sober? Is their life getting better or not? And there's no analyzing, nothing. And so really quickly along the way, I figured out we were missing an arm. There was something missing. I was treating people, but I got really clear that it seemed like maybe I'm getting middled. Maybe I'm getting lied to. Maybe I don't have the full picture when I'm dealing with an addict. And so we start including, when I met Angie, it was this beautiful thing where she was being coached, and she would take coaching, and she would do this work of how to make these moves for her son, and they would work. And inevitably, we made the right moves and the right strategy until her son was with us. And then Angie started bringing families to us, and so started bringing families to me more, one by one, more, and we formed Battlefield. And all of a sudden, we had two arms to work with. We had our own arm that was helping people, but another arm that kind of brought them right and forced them to face this. And so, it was going along, and we were doing pretty good. And it was pretty easy to help families because the community really lined up with what we were doing. Meaning, we had the help of DOC officers like Lily, who's in the audience, and we had the help of families. Families wanted it done. They wanted to stop. But we started having these consultations with families, and we started realizing, what I started realizing was there's two reactions to drug addiction. The first reaction is sympathy. And I saw it. I saw sympathy for people. I would see a mother, and she would be very sympathetic towards their struggling son, and she would explain to me all the reasons why they deserved to use drugs and why it was okay. And then there was another reaction that started showing up, and that was anger. So no matter what, we dealt with these two reactions. Usually an angry father that was done with it, didn't want to spend no more money, didn't want any part of it, and then a sympathetic mother. And see, sympathy put onto this thing, when it does, it really grows it. A drug addict needs people to feel sorry for him in order to manipulate. It's a real thing that you can do when someone feels sorry for you. And so we started seeing that we would have to coach this family on how to treat this. How to treat it. So what would we do? Well, we can't treat it with anger, because that's wrong, because it's not something to be angry about. And we can't treat it with sympathy, because that'll lead to enabling. And so what we did was we said, we're going to teach this family to be a stand. We're going to show them how to be a stand for the other person's sobriety, for the other person's independence. And what it meant was that we're going to have to do that with an open heart and hold people accountable in their family. They're going to have, so it's two things. Tough love could be described in that way, and tough love was always thrown around, but we never liked that term. So what really came about was open-hearted accountability. How do I be firm? How do we be a stand for another human being? How do we say this no longer is acceptable, but we're not mad at you? You will stay around us. You will be part of this family, but you can't do that anymore. And so that's what we began to teach. Lo and behold, about 2016, there was a shift around here. I don't know if you all remember it, know what happened, but see, what happened was experts started getting involved. You see, you started hearing what the experts say. And drug addiction is the only field where someone would be considered an expert without never being part of the game. You see what I'm saying? If you've never put a roof on a house, you could not be considered a roof expert. If you've never plumbed a house, you couldn't be considered a plumbing expert. If you've never played on a football field and you talked about the players, you were called a commentator. That's it. That's all you were. But all of a sudden, experts came, and the first thing the experts did was they said this. They said, it's not addiction. They changed the language. They said they're not addicts. They're people suffering from addiction, or they're people with a substance use disorder. So I wondered why back then. And all of a sudden there became this kind of civil rights movement for drug addicts. And I don't know if you remember this, but it happened. And people started defending the behavior. They started saying it's okay. At the same time, they started coming up with, how do you treat addiction? Well, you make it stop. Well, how do you treat a substance use disorder? Well, you medicate it. So at the same time, medicated assisted became big. Medication-assisted treatment became a thing. And so they said, hey, listen, you got a disorder, and you can't actually get rid of that. You can't actually stop that behavior. We'll give you some medication. So all of a sudden, there became this protectionism. See, there became a people that no longer people were angry at drugs. The sympathetic side began to win over. And people started developing this real sympathy for a person that's killing themselves and saying it's okay. And we saw that with the language change. And as we went on, we saw it explode. We saw addiction explode. Not only because of the supply, but also because look at the way we treat it. See, look at the way we treat it so we had to teach families how to treat it. You see, there wasn't treatment. My father didn't have treatment, but my father treated my addiction that day. You see, and that's what we're not doing is look at how as a community we treat addiction. We don't treat it so that it stops. We treat it so that it can get bigger. You see? And so we saw that. We saw that where treatment isn't where you show up at the place. See, when we began to work with the families, what we saw was treatment is what happens before they get there. And we can have a dramatic effect on the person's recovery if we treat it right before they get into my facility. But if we don't treat it right, if we let it have resources, if we let it have life, then we apply pressure and accountability to that person, but they can go back to people that enable them. They can go back to softer, gentler places. And so now, because we didn't treat it right, we're losing ground in the recovery world, you see? So that's what ended up happening. It became very difficult for us because we think treatment is a place. Just so you know, all the people on the streets of Seattle are in a treatment bed tonight. That's where they're at. We could get them sober right there. We don't need more beds. Stop with the nonsense about needing more beds. It's absolutely ridiculous. We can't get people to go to treatment because of the way we're treating it. That's why they won't go. I will challenge anyone in this audience today to go down to Seattle and get one person to come to my program. I'll let them come for free. You won't. Because of the way we treat it, because it's acceptable, because it's okay to kill yourself, because we're not a stand for these people. We're not standing up and saying, we love you so much you got to stop now. See, we don't say that. We allow it. We let it happen. You think somebody folded up on a street corner doesn't need help right now? You think it's time to wait? What are you talking about? So what we saw was now, the question is now, what are we going to do? Are we going to stand up and treat this properly to catapult people into recovery? Or are we going to continue to treat it the way they're treating it now? Harm reduction. Imagine if you that's all had a kid getting high in your house. Imagine if you tried harm reduction when you lived in your basement. And what you did was you went out and you bought them drugs. And you made sure you had Narcan so they can get high all night. And then you gave them money and you said, you know what we need? We need to make sure he's got a safe place to do it. Well, you would be killing your family member and you know it. And so here's what we're doing as a community. We're not treating it properly, and of course it's growing. We knew that. We knew the experts were up to something. What do you mean you're an expert? Have you ever got somebody sober? Have you ever been a drug addict? But you're where? At your college campus analyzing what we're all doing on the ground? You don't know anything. See, experts say is when we get into trouble. It's what they mean by, guess what, some money's involved, in my opinion, and we're going to sway it our way. But see, we've been getting, imagine if we tried this with alcoholics. Why is there no harm reduction for alcoholics? Why? Why aren't we saying stop arresting them when they drink and drive? They've got an alcohol use disorder. Imagine if we tried that. There was a bunch of alcoholics on the streets of Seattle and we tried to bring them nicer shot glasses. We tried to bring them more booze and say, drink the safe stuff. No, we would never do that because, see, we understand that an alcoholic can't make decisions for themselves. We understand that about alcoholism. But for some reason, we don't understand it about fentanyl. We think that the people are doing good. Well, they're not. So here at Battlefield, our community work is about what we're going to be. Are we going to take a stand for people? Do we stand for their independence or their sobriety? Or do we feel sympathetic towards them? Just so you know, I got a lot of people in my program. None of them got a disorder. So who decided that? Who decided to start saying we have a disorder? Stand up in any NA room, any alcohol AA room. Hi, I'm Art, I'm an addict. Why did you change my language? See, if I had a disorder for 17 years, then something was wrong with me. But see, I love the fact that I was an addict. I'm proud of it. Addiction's been my greatest teacher. It's what's brought you all here tonight. So I'm proud of the fact that I'm an addict. And I'm going to say it strong. And no, you don't need to tell me I got a disorder because that's just not true. See, you don't need to treat me with medication. For every person out there that's using drugs right now, total abstinence is possible. You can do it too. So it's all about what we're going to do as a community. How are we going to treat this? It's about what you're going to do as a family. And what works for the family works for the community. The same things that you had to do in your family, now just look out there. You guys know what's going to work or not. So that's what this is about. Changing how we treat it, because it isn't the treatment place that gets someone sober. It's how we treat them before they get there that catapults them into the wantingness to be sober. Is to say we're going to move people along till they want it. Well, they're going to want it because of the consequences they face, because of the leverage we have, how we've treated them because of it. And there became this very sympathetic way in which we treat it. And if you guys think it's working, let me know, but it's not. So it's time. Why do people do that? It's time to move to this center. It's time to be a stand. It's time to say no more deaths. It's not acceptable anymore. And we're going to get you sober by any means. We don't care how. And by the way, you'll thank me later. And I'll stand up to all your hate and all your gaslighting and all your bullshit, because you'll thank me later. I'm not going to be very good at thanking people, but I thank everyone for being here. This is an honor to do this work, and I've always said, I just do it, and if God wants me to quit, he'll run me out of money. And, you know, thank you for being here and helping the money keep coming so me and Angie can do this every day, because that's all we know how to do and that's all we want to do, is be a stand for families, communities, and human beings. Be a stand for independence, a stand for people getting well, not leaving them. You know, what is the reason to meet someone where they're at? It's to take them where they need to go, and that's the only reason. You don't meet people where they're at so they can just lavish in it and you can be with them where they're at in that nasty place. No, it's to meet them where they're at and then take them somewhere. And you got to be taking them somewhere good. So again, a little excited, but thank you. It gets me fired up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.